Think about your best friend from high school. Or, maybe someone you were just inseparable from in your early 20s.
Oh yeah, we all have that one person.
Right. Now think about the last time you actually spoke to them.
For a lot of people, that's kind of a really uncomfortable thought.
It really is. Because if it's been months, or I don't know, maybe even years, you probably feel this little pit of guilt in your stomach.
Yeah, absolutely.
You tell yourself you failed at maintaining that relationship. But what if a textbook, specifically a guide designed to teach conversational English, actually proves that you didn't fail at anything?
It's crazy, but
Like,
yeah.
what if you were just a victim of adult social physics?
I love that phrasing because it completely flips the script on how we view our own social failures.
Exactly.
We tend to view lost connections as these huge personal shortcomings, but the vocabulary we use to describe relationships actually maps out this inevitable systemic shift. It shows how human beings are basically forced to relate to one another as they age.
And that is the core of our deep dive today. We're looking at the mechanics of modern adult friendships.
Yes, through a very unexpected lens.
Seriously, our source material for this is fascinatingly bizarre. We aren't analyzing a clinical psychology paper or some dense sociological study.
No, not at all.
We are looking at a language guide, a literal ESL textbook. But when you strip away the grammar lessons, this guide serves as a surprisingly profound psychological blueprint.
It really does. It shows how we connect, how we disconnect, and honestly, what it takes to actually maintain the bonds in our lives.
Because the vocabulary the guide teaches, these everyday phrases we use without a second thought, they actually reveal the hidden architecture of human behavior.
Right. It exposes this massive societal barrier to entry that gets erected the second we leave childhood.
So I want everyone listening to just keep your own social circle in mind as we go through this. Think about how your friendships actually function today versus, say, 10 years ago.
That's a great exercise.
Because to understand why adult friendships feel like so much work, we have to look at why they felt so effortless when we were younger.
Which was so much easier.
Oh, entirely. The source material points out that in school, you naturally bond over incredibly simple situational things. It specifically uses the example of bonding over simply having the same classes.
Which just highlights the massive role of environment.
Right.
When you are a kid, the institution of school essentially traps you in a room with your peers for 8 hours a day. It's an involuntary community.
You're just stuck there.
Exactly. You don't have to seek out common ground because the common ground is literally forced upon you.
Yeah.
You bond over a shared teacher or a shared lunch schedule or just sitting at the exact same table. The environment does all the heavy lifting for you.
It's totally passive friendship building. You don't have to try. You just have to exist in the same space.
Yeah, just show up.
But then the guy highlights the adult shift. As adults, the physical proximity completely evaporates. You aren't forced into a room with 50 people your exact age anymore. Nope.
So the whole basis of bonding over completely changes. We can't rely on just sitting next to someone.
Right. The transition goes from external proximity to internal alignment.
Which is huge.
It is. The guide notes that adults bond over highly specific, curated shared interests. The example they use is a mutual love for fantasy literature and music.
Which, I mean, that feels completely counterintuitive in a way. We like to think relationships are built on deep, unbreakable soul connections.
Yeah, not just a shared hobby.
Right. But practically speaking, finding an adult who shares your niche interests requires you to actively seek them out. It takes an enormous amount of time and energy.
Two things that busy adults simply do not have in abundance.
Exactly. And that lack of time and energy ushers in what the guide captures with the phrase drifting apart.
Oh, the dreaded drift.
Okay, let's unpack this, because what's brilliant about that specific phrasing in the guide isn't just the definition. Like, we all know what drifting apart means.
Yeah. It's the physics of the phrase itself. A drift implies a complete lack of intention. The source specifically notes that drifting apart is a natural consequence of changing priorities.
Meaning there is no big fight.
All right. There is no villain. It's just gravity.
What's fascinating here is that the language completely removes the element of blame, which is just so crucial to understand.
Yes, because we beat ourselves up over it.
We carry so much guilt when we lose touch with someone. But by framing it as a natural consequence of shifting priorities, the text acknowledges this kind of melancholic reality of adulthood.
Yeah.
You get a demanding job, you have a child, you move to a new city. Your priorities naturally rearrange themselves just for survival.
You had to adapt.
Right. And if those priorities no longer intersect with a friend's priorities, the drift just happens entirely on its own.
It's almost like tectonic plates. You don't really see the ground moving from day to day.
Oh, wow. That is a perfect way to look at it because the movement is completely subsurface. The changing priorities are like the magma moving underneath, totally out of sight.
Right, so there's no dramatic earthquake. There's no volcano erupting. You just wake up one day and you realize the continent of your friendship has split in two.
Yeah.
And there's a literal ocean between you now, and neither of you did anything malicious to cause it.
Because you can't stop the Earth from shifting. You can't stop your friends' priorities from evolving as they navigate their own complex life. The text makes it very clear the drift is the default state of adulthood.
But if that drift is the inevitable default setting of adult life, I mean, it makes you wonder why we don't all just end up entirely alone by age 40.
A lot of people feel like they are.
True, but clearly some mechanism is fighting that gravity for us to have any friends at all.
Which brings us to the survival mechanics of modern friendship. If the drift is passive, combating it must be highly active.
Okay.
The source highlights the phrase keeping in touch, emphasizing that it requires maintaining contact over time, despite massive physical barriers like moving to different cities.
So it requires an active defiance of that tectonic shift we were just talking about.
Like-
And the guide says that defiance takes the form of reaching out. But honestly, here's where it gets really interesting, because I have a real problem with this one.
Oh.
You say reaching out is the fix, but if I'm being honest, I hate reaching out.
Most people do.
It feels so intrusive. Like, if a friend hasn't texted me in a year, my brain immediately assumes they've moved on, or they're too busy, or they just don't want to hear from me.
Yeah, the anxiety is real.
So does the guide actually address that psychological hurdle, or does it just expect us to be fearless?
Well, it doesn't use the word fear,
Right.
but the vulnerability is entirely implied by how it frames the action. Reaching out requires one person to take the initiative across a literal void.
Yeah.
It demands that you risk the silence. You have to admit that you want the connection, knowing full well the other person might be too swamped with their new priorities to reciprocate.
So the fear of rejection is completely valid. It's basically the cost of admission.
It is the tax you pay for adult connection. In childhood, there was no risk involved in just existing next to someone in a classroom. But reaching out is a deliberate, conscious extension of effort. It requires a level of emotional bravery that simply wasn't required when we were just bonding over, having the same biology teacher.
Okay, let's say you actually muster up the bravery.
Yeah.
You send the text, you risk the rejection, and it actually pays off.
The best case scenario.
Right, you get to experience what the guide calls catching up. And the text points out a really fascinating psychological quirk about this, the illusion of time collapsing.
Yes, I love this part.
Like, you haven't seen a friend in 3 years, you sit down for coffee, and within 10 minutes, you are exactly where you left off.
It feels like magic.
It does. But how is that mathematically possible? We just established that our lives and priorities are constantly changing. If we are completely different people than we were 3 years ago, how does time just collapse like that?
It all comes down to the depth of the data being shared. The guide explicitly notes that catch-ups only feel authentic when you share real feelings and experiences. Small talk anchors you in the superficial present. You talk about the weather, your commute, the surface-level stress of your job. That just highlights the distance between you.
Because those surface details are exactly what changed during the drift.
Precisely. But when you share real vulnerability, you bypass those superficial changes entirely. You reconnect at the core identity level. The physical time apart becomes irrelevant because the emotional baseline was preserved.
Oh, it's like syncing your phones.
How do you mean?
Well, if you just look at the new apps on the home screen, the phones look completely different.
Right.
But if you take a second to download the latest software update on each other's lives, the underlying operating system works perfectly again.
That is a great analogy.
But it only works if you are actually transferring the real data, the deep, vulnerable feelings, not just the small talk.
Because small talk cannot collapse time. It only reinforces the drift. Vulnerability is the only mechanism that bridges the ocean.
Which brings up a huge logistical problem, I think. We know how to maintain these ties. It takes the active effort of keeping in touch, the terrifying vulnerability of reaching out, and the deep emotional bandwidth of catching up.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
But who are we maintaining these ties with? especially today in a digital ecosystem that practically forces us to stay continuously, loosely connected to every single person we've ever met.
Yeah, the tension between the network and the circle. The guide actually addresses this through a vital discussion question. Is it better to have a large network of acquaintances or a small, quote-unquote, close-knit group of friends?
Ah, the age-old debate of quantity versus quality.
Exactly. And the source leans heavily into the close-knit group. It defines it as a tightly integrated circle and uses the example of friends who commit to meeting every single Friday.
Okay, but let me challenge that for a second.
Go for it.
The guide praises this type of group, but is that actually realistic? Expecting adults in their 30s or 40s with careers and families to commit to every single Friday night feels like a massive recipe for burnout.
It's a lot.
Doesn't placing that much structural pressure on a friendship actually risk destroying it?
It certainly creates immense pressure, you're right. But the guide uses that extreme example to illustrate the concept of prioritization. Meeting every Friday requires a massive, unyielding commitment of adult time.
Yeah, no kidding.
It forces you to elevate that specific group above almost any other variable in your life. It is the absolute antithesis of drifting apart. You are intentionally building an anchor. It might be exhausting, but it guarantees the drift cannot happen.
I suppose that makes sense. It's like the ultimate defense mechanism against gravity.
Mm.
But then the text throws a wrench into the modern reality by asking if social media makes it easier or harder to maintain meaningful friendships.
Which is the big question.
Right, because social media gives us this massive, sprawling network without the Friday night commitment. We can see our high school friends' vacation photos. We can see what our old coworker had for lunch.
Which creates an incredibly dangerous psychological paradox. The digital landscape allows us to maintain thousands of low-stakes connections.
Yeah.
We never fully drift apart from anyone because their life updates are passively pushed to our screens. Our brains get the dopamine hit of recognizing a familiar face, which tricks us into feeling socially satiated.
We feel connected without actually doing the work.
Exactly. Because we never truly lose sight of them, we rarely feel the urgent, vulnerable need to actually reach out and genuinely catch up. The passive connection replaces the active maintenance.
Wow.
Social media gives us the illusion of proximity that we used to have in a childhood classroom, but without any of the actual depth.
So what does this all mean? I look at it like this. A massive social media network of acquaintances is basically like a giant, incredibly shallow pond.
Okay, I like that.
It covers a ton of surface area. It looks highly impressive from a distance. But a close-knit group, the kind that anchors you, is like a deep well. It has a very small, very narrow footprint, but it goes all the way down to the bedrock.
That's a powerful image.
And here is the kicker. You can only draw water from the deep well during a drought. The shallow pond just evaporates the second the sun comes out and the heat gets turned up.
The drought is a perfect analogy for the inevitable hard times in life. And that aligns perfectly with the ultimate test outlined in our source material, which is identifying the fair weather friend.
Ah, yes, the fair weather friend.
Yeah.
The text defines this as someone who is only around when things are going well.
Right.
The literal translation being they only stick around when the weather is nice. The second the drought hits, they dry up.
And this raises an important question. The guide contrasts this sharply by stating that a true friend supports you during hard times. This presents a critical evaluation for anyone analyzing their own social circle. Where are you investing your limited, highly valuable adult energy? Are you cultivating a massive network of fair weather acquaintances through passive digital scrolling?
Ouch.
Or are you putting in the frightening, vulnerable work to dig a deep well that will actually sustain you when the hard times hit?
Because human capacity is finite. You really cannot have both at the deepest level.
No, it's impossible.
Adult life simply does not give you enough time, energy, or emotional bandwidth to maintain 50 deep wells. You have to consciously choose where to dig.
You do.
And realizing that you might have spent the last 5 years investing all your energy into the shallow pond of fair weather friends. Well, it can be a very harsh awakening.
It forces a reckoning, really. It highlights that in adulthood, every social interaction, or the conscious lack thereof, is a choice about where you allocate your survival resources.
So to bring this all together and summarize the journey we've been on today, adulthood completely rewrites the fundamental rules of human connection. We lose the built-in passive bonding of shared classrooms and geographic proximity. The tectonic plates of our lives begin to shift as we pursue careers, move to new cities, and just, build our lives.
Yeah.
The natural, blameless gravity of shifting priorities causes us to drift apart from people we once considered our entire world.
And to fight that relentless gravity, we cannot just rely on the passive, shallow pond of our social media feeds.
We have to actively battle the drift. We have to make the scary, often uncomfortable choice to reach out across the void and risk the silence.
Absolutely.
We have to sit down, look our friends in the eye, and do the vulnerable work of catching up by sharing our real, authentic feelings, hoping that we can still collapse the time between us.
That's the real work.
It is. So for you listening right now, take a hard look at your circle. Who is actually in your deep well? And perhaps more importantly, which old friend do you need to endure the discomfort of reaching out to this weekend?
That really is the essential work of maintaining connection. But I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to chew on, based entirely on the definitions in our source material.
I'm ready for this.
The text explicitly states that people naturally drift apart as their priorities change. It is presented as a law of adult physics. But if human beings are inherently dynamic, if our career, our families, and our personal philosophies are constantly evolving throughout our entire lives, doesn't that mean our priorities are in a perpetual state of flux?
I mean, yeah, they never stay static for long.
Right. And if our priorities are always changing, does that mean every single friendship we have is ultimately on a ticking timer?
Oh, wow.
Are we all destined to eventually drift apart from everyone we know unless we actively choose to continuously, exhaustingly, sync our ever-evolving priorities with theirs for the rest of our lives?
Wow, that means the concrete is never actually fully dry. The architecture of an adult friendship isn't a solid structure you just build once, admire, and walk away from. It is something you have to wake up and consciously decide to rebuild, brick by brick, against the pull of gravity every single day.
Beautifully said.
We'll keep learning, keep exploring your own deep wells, and we will catch up with you on the next deep dive.